Good morning, people. It's Menenberg. As you may have noticed, I've changed my background a little bit. Apparently, it was a little sterile in the earlier videos, and I want to prove that I have books. So books, I guess that means I'm smart. Anyway, this morning, we're going to just dive a little bit deeper into a couple of the pieces of the DBQ. Today, in this video, we're going to look primarily at the analysis reasoning point number 1, in particular, the letter C in CAPP, or for those of you who are doing HIPP, the letter H. It is the historical situation, historical context, whatever you want to say, and we're going to look at how you might get that point by analyzing various documents. So first, it might be helpful for you to look at the DBQ rubric that they've adjusted. Again, there's a link to this on PowerSchool. But basically, what we're doing here is we are explaining first what the context is, and then why that context matters as we read that document. So first I want to explain a little bit about what it is and what it is not. So if you're looking at the decision rules on that rubric, I want to read that out loud so you have that in your mind. It says, to earn this point, the response must explain how or why, rather than simply identifying the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, that's the one we're focusing on, or audience, and is how it's relevant to an argument about the prompt for each document source. So, in other words, if you were going to do the C, the historical situation or context for document 2, for example, you need to explain how or why that context is relevant to your argument. Okay? So I'm going to give you an example of what that might be. In our imperialism document based question, we looked at a lot of documents that had stuff in it about white man's burden or social Darwinism. So if you were reading document 5, for example, and it's from an English person who is referencing how certain people are, like white people, for example, it's important for them to go out and imperialize different people in Africa because they are better, and white people are better, and they have a right or an important burden to do that. Your context would be to explain in that document why white man's burden or the concept of social Darwinism at that time in the 19th century was emerging as a popular belief system for white Europeans. And the reason you are doing this is so that you can identify to the reader your understanding of the broader historical things that are going on, rather than just being able to summarize the document. By identifying the trends of popular thinking in Europe at that time, social Darwinism namely, you're putting that document in a context that is a little bit larger than simply the words in that specific document. This is complicated, but instead of just identifying the sourcing information that is given to you, you're expanding that a bit. Now, what it's not is taking the context of the overall topic of the prompt. So if we're talking about imperialism, you can't just say this document occurred within the context of imperialism in the 19th century. Of course it did. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given you the document. That's very obvious. You're not going to get the point. So you have to go specific to the actual document that is given. Some hints that you might get are the location, which, it says British politician, you're in the British Empire. Date, you may know a lot about that specific date. You may not, but you want to frame it within a very close proximity date-wise and what's going on at that time in that place, if possible. Now, this is where your content knowledge is going to come into play. A lot of you are doing a ton of content review. That's great. This is where this is going to help. Context is probably the only place where your real content knowledge is going to play into it on the analysis and reasoning side of things for analysis reasoning point 1 and 2. But you can do this, and it's really just going to come down to what you know about that time period in that specific region. Okay? And again, I would isolate it to within 5 to 10 years of that document. If you don't know, you can expand it within a quarter century, maybe even a half if you're really unsure. It's worth taking a shot, though. The bottom line is, by trying to attempting the context, you could in fact end up getting outside evidence points. You could in fact get some other CAPP points inadvertently, but you're at least attempting, and you'll likely get the evidence point 1 and 2, where you're identifying the content of the document and using it for your argument. So attempting the CAPP is a good way of at least ensuring that you're going to get those evidence points as well. Again, the problems I saw generally with the context were that you were going way too broad. Saying it's about imperialism, not enough. Okay, that's more the contextualization paragraph at the beginning. But if you're just doing the C, the lowercase c, that is, you can really isolate it to that specific document. Now, another important reason that I would consider doing context, and this is my go-to if I'm capping docs, if I'm going to attempt to cap all 5 docs, which is what I suggest you do because you're not going to get every one of them, if you do the context, you're definitely a lot more likely to get those outside evidence pieces as well, because once they check off these boxes, remember, you only have to cap 2 documents to get 2 analysis and reasoning points. 2 docs, 1 for each, or 2 points, 1 for each doc. If you did all 5 though, and you do 3 of them well, guess what that third one does? It's not like extra credit on analysis and reasoning, but that extra context piece is probably going to be outside evidence points for evidence points number 4 and 5. So you may as well keep on going because it gives you a good way to get extra points on this adjusted DBQ rubric. I hope that helps. This is the context for now. I'm going to get analysis and reasoning points for audience, point of view, and purpose later on. Short video, more to come. Enjoy.